All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out to our first in-person GRadulting workshop of the year and the first in-person in a few years. Today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about getting a Maryland driver's license, whether you're a first-time driver, whether you're from out of state or out of the country, how to get a Maryland driver's license. We're going to talk about who needs a license to be able to drive in the state of Maryland, and then the different types of different processes you may have to go through to get a license depending on your driving history. First, just a little bit of an update from the Maryland MVA. Ever since the pandemic, they've been requiring appointments for all of their, for anything you want to do, whether you want to take a test, a driver's test, whether you just want to file some paperwork to get a new license. And so you do have to schedule it online. It is a pretty easy system to use, and so you can go through their website. We're going to share the PowerPoint at the end so that you have all of these links. But you can go through mva.maryland.gov to schedule your appointment. And in most cases, you can get it within a week or two. But you want to pre-apply for and submit all your paperwork ahead of time so that you can expedite the process when you get there. As with most sort of Department of Motor Vehicles, they do have a tendency to be a little bit slow on the day of, but scheduling an appointment is the best way to get it done quickly. Question? Yes. Yep. Yeah, you don't have to take notes. No, we're going to email it out to you so that you have all the information. The two closest, there's two close MVAs. One of them is in Beltsville, which is about 4 or 5 miles north on Route 1 on Baltimore Avenue, and it's still here in Prince George's County. The other is in White Oak, which is towards Silver Spring. You can take 193 west towards Silver Spring to get over that way. The Beltsville one is technically closer, but students usually tell us that there's a little bit more availability for appointments at the White Oak one. And so when you're going online, depending on your ability, even the White Oak one is only about 15 or 20 minutes away from campus. So just check both locations for your appointments, and you might be able to get one sooner at the White Oak location. Who needs a Maryland driver's license? The short answer is anybody who wants to drive in the state of Maryland needs a Maryland driver's license. A little bit of the technicality is it's anyone who is a resident of Maryland needs a Maryland driver's license. If you technically do not live in the state of Maryland, but just attend the university, you should get a license wherever you live. If you live in DC or Northern Virginia, and you're a resident there, that's where you should get your license. There are also situations where you might not claim residency in the state of Maryland. If you are coming from another U.S. state, you can move to Maryland, attend school in Maryland, but still maintain your permanent residency in your home state. If that is the case, you don't have to convert to a Maryland driver's license. And a lot of this will deal with some other sort of more complicated paperwork, like are you still filing taxes in your home state? If you have a business at your home state, you own a property in that other state, it may be easier to still claim residency in that previous state, and thus you're sort of not a resident in Maryland. If that's the case, you're not going to be eligible for in-state tuition. So that's sort of a choice you have to make, but depending on your program, sometimes a GA can, if you're getting your tuition covered anyway, it's not going to make a difference. But even if you don't live in Maryland and you have a home state license and you aren't going to claim residency in Maryland, so then you don't have to convert to a Maryland driver's license. If you have an out-of-state license, you may be able to keep. That's kind of what I just touched on. I guess I just didn't go to the slide fast enough. If you maintain a primary residence there, or if you own a home there, you continue to pay taxes there, or you have family connections that still live there, and that's what you claim as your permanent address. With those bona fide connections, you can claim residency in that state. But if you start paying taxes and in Maryland as a Maryland resident, then you're going to have to convert and get that Maryland driver's license. I guess one other tip here at the bottom, if for some reason your license is suspended or it was revoked, meaning canceled in another U.S. state, then they're also not going to let you get a Maryland driver's license until whatever punishment in your home state is till the time expires. So if you have a 12-month suspension, you have to wait for that 12 months to expire. You can't just move to Maryland and suddenly become eligible to drive again if they took away your driving privileges. Converting an out-of-state license is the easiest way to get a license in Maryland. If you already have a license from another U.S. state, you have to do it within 60 days of becoming a resident. Now, in most cases, that's within 60 days of moving to the state of Maryland is when you become a resident. And you luckily don't have to take the test. You don't have to take any test. All you have to do is fill out a form and pass the vision screening. So they make you look into a little camera, and you look at a balloon and see how focused it is, and you read some numbers for them. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to take any of the tests, the driving test or the road test. You just have to pass the vision screening. As long as your out-of-state license is still valid or it's expired for less than 1 year, you're eligible for that. If it is expired for more than 1 year, then you're going to be required to go through a few extra hoops, which is taking the written and the driving test. So if you're close to that expiration date or close to being a year past the expiration date, hurry up and apply to convert to a Maryland license now so that you can skip all that retesting. Sometimes people may have a learner's permit in another state and then they moved and so they never achieved the full license. Unfortunately, you're going to have to start the process over in the state of Maryland. They don't let you convert that from a learner's permit to a learner's permit. Though at the end of the day, it's pretty easy to get a learner's permit, so it shouldn't be too complicated. What can be a little bit more complicated is if you have an out-of-country license. It's still a pretty straightforward process, but there's just more paperwork involved in how you to apply. And so if you have a license from another country, it can be valid in the state of Maryland for up to 12 months. So you can still drive in the state of Maryland for your first year here without converting to a Maryland license. But if it's not in English, it has to be, you have to have the certified translation. There's a list on the MVA website that has their certified translators who will translate the license for you. And you always have to have that certified translation with you if your out-of-country license is not in English. So make sure you're carrying that with you at all times. One little thing to know about is police officers in the US do have a reputation for maybe not being the brightest of individuals. The out-of-country licenses are a very unique experience, and many officers will never have pulled over somebody with an out-of-country license before. And so they're not all familiar with the leeway, the allowance of allowing to drive on an out-of-country license for 12 months. If they write you a ticket for driving without a license or being unauthorized to drive in the US, it's okay. Let us know. I can help you with that. I can provide you. You're going to have to go to court to dispute the ticket, but in most cases it will be dismissed as long as you're within that 12-month period. And I can tell you what to explain to the judge, but don't it doesn't benefit you to argue with the police officer. You can tell them that you know you're eligible, but don't sort of yell at them or anything like that. Just accept the ticket. Let me know. Come to our office email us at glao@umd.edu to schedule an appointment, and I can make sure that I can try to help you make sure that ticket gets dismissed. And because of that, just to avoid the hassle, we do encourage you to get a Maryland driver's license, especially if you're going to be in the state of Maryland for more than a year. You might as well get it now instead of later, because it's going to be the same hassle at all times. If you have an international driving permit, that is not valid in the state of Maryland. But people have those less frequently than they used to. So converting an international license, what do you have to do? If you have a valid license from another country, you can convert it after you take a vision screening, a knowledge test, a driving skills test, and take a 3-hour class on the downsides of being drugged and alcohol. So it's telling you, don't drive while you're high, don't drive while you're drunk. If you are from Canada, France, South Korea, Germany, Taiwan, or Japan, then you don't have to actually take the knowledge or the driving test, but you do still have to take the vision screening. Everybody always has to take the vision screening, as well as the 3-hour drug and alcohol education program. But you can waive out of the test if you come from one of those 6 countries. They have specific agreements with the US, and the state of Maryland signs on to that, so that you can kind of skip the testing. The one benefit, so when you're thinking about the process, we're going to go through the process for if you've never had a license. The one thing you get to skip if you do have an international license, a license from your home country, is you get to skip going through the driver's education class, which is usually about 40 hours of classroom time that you take. And then there's 6 hours of driving time that you have to take with a certified instructor. And that also you pay for independently. And so all of this stuff is pretty affordable compared to a driver's ed, which can be a little bit more expensive. For any sort of international, if you're an international student, you always want to submit your paperwork ahead of time so that it can be pre-approved. And so all of your USCIS paperwork that we're going to talk about in a moment, you want to pre-submit through something called Save Verification, and they will make sure that your documents are up to date and valid, as opposed to the person that you go to for your appointment. They're not going to be able to instantly verify that information. So really, if you schedule an appointment without pre-submitting through Save, they're just going to accept that paperwork from you and tell you, okay, we can't automatically approve this right now. And then they're going to tell you to schedule a follow-up appointment. So instead of doing that and saving yourself a trip, you can pre-submit everything through the MBA website, through their Save verification process, and you will be notified when that gets approved, and then you can schedule that appointment so that you know everything is okay with your paperwork. What documents do you need? You need proof of age identity. That could be, most likely that's going to be your passport, your lawful presence, which is tied to your visa. You need a social security number or your letter of ineligibility. Now, almost every one of you as an international student are going to be ineligible for a social security number at this time under your F1 or J1 visa. What you have to do is go through the Social Security Administration and apply. You can submit a request for a social security number. They're going to tell you, no, you're not eligible. That letter that says, no, you're not eligible is what you have to provide to the MBA. And so that does take a little bit of time to get, not too long, it's usually just a couple of weeks, but just something to think about to get the ball rolling to apply for that. And so you can find that you can either do it directly on the website, or you can schedule an appointment through your local Social Security Administration office. And to apply for that, you're going to need your passport, your F1 visa, your I-20, and your I-94, all of which you should have, and you know that you've worked with and gotten through, well, not all of it through ISSS, but obviously this paperwork, if you have started your semester here at the university, you've had to provide that paperwork already. And so you should have that on hand. If you have never had a license before, there is a 3-step process to getting a full license in the state of Maryland. The first is getting a learner's permit. The second is you'll get a provisional license, which is very much like a full driver's license, but depending on your age, has some restrictions on it. If you are a graduate student, you're probably not under the age of 18, or maybe you are a child prodigy who is in graduate school here. So if you're under the age of 18 on a provisional license, there's restrictions. You can't drive with anyone else under the age of 18 unless you have an adult in the car. Some provisions like that, but for the most part, provisional license for people in their 20s doesn't have a lot of restrictions on it. If you do not have a driver's license, to get the permit, you have to pass that vision test that everybody always has to pass, and you have to take the written test, or a knowledge test. There is a handbook that is provided and I think there's even a few extra languages now. There are a number of different languages that it is provided in if you would like to study it in your native language, or the first language you learn, as opposed to studying in English. And you can find all of those on the MBA's website. But it's just about learning the rules of the road, is what they call them. So you're learning about speed limits, you're learning about blinkers, you're learning about how far you have to travel behind everyone to keep it a safe distance, when you need to change lanes if you see a police officer on the side of the road, all of those sorts of safety items and what each sign means. It's not that hard, to be honest. If you take the time to read through the handbook and study it once or twice and take the online practice test, you shouldn't have difficulty with it. But like anything with driving, it doesn't really matter if you don't pass on your first time. You can take it a number of times and it won't be problematic. Once you get your learner's permit does not entitle you to drive by yourself. You always have to have someone else driving with you in the car, and they must be over the age of 21. Sometimes this can be problematic for international students who don't have family, because that's sort of how this is set up. You're thinking of people who maybe grew up in the state of Maryland and they have their parents, or they have older siblings or aunts and uncles that can ride with them while they have their learner's permit. And so it can be a little bit frustrating, but unfortunately there's no allowances for that situation. So find friends that are willing to ride with you, that have a license. that can be that person with you in the car, just so you avoid violating the law and potentially getting fined for that. You have to have it every time you're in the car. The learner's permit is valid for 2 years, or if your status is for less than that, based on your visa and the end date that's on the visa, we'll put that end date as the last date of your that it will expire. There are 3 requirements for you to change your learner's permit into the driver's license, the provisional license. The one is you have to drive 60 hours with a supervising driver, and so they give you a little log. It's a little bit of an honor system, but your supervising driver is supposed to sign the log to say, yes, I was in the car with them while we drove for this amount of time. And so you ride with someone at all times, and you just have to drive 60 hours in the time period before you can apply to take the test. You have to also take the driver's education course. They are run through independent companies that are not part of the government. There are a number here in College Park, Hyattsville, Greenbelt, there's lots of them all over the place. They do maintain a list of them on the NBA website, but you can also Google and find a whole bunch of them. A lot of them do. Some of them are still online. Some of them you may have to do it in person, but it's a whole course you go through and take the coursework, and it's pretty straightforward, but it is a requirement. And then you have to maintain a clean driving record for a certain period of time that depends on your age. And so if while you're on your learner's permit, you get pulled over for speeding or reckless driving or any of those things, then that time will reset. And then before you can apply for the full license. If you are under the age of 18, you have to have it for 9 months. If you are 19 to 24, you have to have it for 3 months. And if you are 25 or older with no movement violations, meaning you didn't get pulled over, you didn't get a ticket from anybody, then 45 days. You have to have your learner's permit for at least 45 days. Camera tickets don't qualify for this. It's only if you actually get pulled over and cited in person. So if you shouldn't, I'm not recommending it. If you run a red light, you get a ticket from a camera, or you get a speeding ticket from a camera. Technically, those are tied to your car, not the driver, because they didn't stop you and verify who the driver was at the time. You must take the driver's education course. It's 30 hours of classroom instruction and 6 hours of driving instruction. They were allowing for some of the classroom instruction to be online at one point, or all of it online. And so check with the driving schools to see if that is still available, so that you can possibly not have to show up, and it could be a little bit more convenient for you. As I mentioned, it is not offered directly from the MVA, the Motor Vehicles Administration, and it's also not offered through UMD. You have to find a private driver's education school and hire and pay them to teach you the classes. And there you can see on the MVA website, you can find a list of all of the certified and approved driving education schools in the state of Maryland. And again, we will email out this PowerPoint, so you'll have all these links to see those lists. The driving log, as I mentioned before, you do have to complete 60 hours of supervised driving. That supervisor has to be someone over the age of 21, and they have to have been licensed in the U.S. for at least 3 years. And you must have a supervisor. You must have a supervisor with you every time you drive. That's something that they take seriously. And they will fine you for and restart your time and all of that. So make sure you take that seriously. Once you do everything, you can now try to get your provisional license. To get your provisional license, you have to pass the driving skills test. So you'll be in a car with someone from the MBA who will tell you what to do, what they want you to drive. The handbook that I mentioned for the knowledge test tells you exactly what to expect in the driving skills test about, what the skills are they're going to ask you to do, like come to a complete stop, maybe make a 3-point turn, make sure you're using your blinker, all of those sorts of things. That it'll tell you what to expect. And so you want to practice those skills with your 60 hours of driving time, or if you're doing a driver's education course, those 6 hours with the certified instructor, they're going to go through exactly what you're covering on the driving skills test so that you feel comfortable with it and can pass it. It is not uncommon for people to fail the driving skills test the first time. It happens. You can take it the next day. You can't retake the same day. but you're eligible to retake the next day after your first failure. After your second failure, they make you wait a week to sort of tell you to practice a little bit more. But it's not the end of the world. Lots of people will fail it, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. One question, a lot of our students may not have cars on campus, and so they may be using rental cars. They're wanting to get a Maryland driver's license so that they can rent a car when they need it. If that is the case, you have to be the one, your name has to be on the rental contract. If you are the one if you're bringing the rental car to the driving skills test. So I guess I should also say, you have to supply your own vehicle. The MBA doesn't supply the vehicle that you take the test in. You show up in your vehicle, and if you're bringing a rental car, they're going to want to make sure that you are authorized to drive the rental car. And so your name has to be on the rental contract when you are showing up with that. It is taken with the MBA staff at the MBA. There's a closed course, but then there's also a road portion. So it's not that difficult, but it's also depending on who the person is that is grading you. Some of them are real sticklers and want everything to be perfect, and so that's why sometimes people fail. So it's okay. It's not the end of the world, and you can take it again. If you have a provisional license, restrictions are you cannot have any measurable alcohol in your system if you're under the age of 21, which under the age of 21, it's not legal to drink in the state of Maryland anyway, to drink alcohol in the state of Maryland. But that means that if you blow a 0.001, that when you take a breathalyzer, that you can get penalized and get fined. If you're under the age of 18, as I mentioned, you cannot ride with any other passengers under the age of 18 unless they are immediate family members, which are sort of children or brothers and sisters, which are probably not children if you're under 18, but maybe. And you can't do that unless you have a qualified supervising driver still. And you may not drive between 12 a.m., midnight, and 5 a.m. But again, that's only if you're under the age of 18. After you don't get a ticket for 18 months or 12 months or 6 months, depending on how long you've been previously licensed, then it becomes a full license. So there aren't really many restrictions for those of you who are, if you're in graduate school, maybe you're in your 20s already, or if you're older than that, then there's not going to be the same restrictions that the provisional license has for when you're under the age of 18. And so it acts kind of as a full license, but it'll still say provisional license at first, even though it doesn't really mean any different. And so then eventually it'll become a full license based on how long you have had a clean record on your provisional license. That's really it. Then there are a ton of resources, as I mentioned before. There is a guide that ISSS maintains that if there was something that you didn't think was answered in our PowerPoint when you're looking at this later, or that I didn't answer and nobody chimed in with, there may be some additional questions answered through ISSS. And similarly, obviously using the mba.maryland.gov website has tons of other resources as well, including that handbook that describes the knowledge test, all the information you need to know for that, and outlines the driving skills test. If you are someone who is into reading statutes and codes instead of handbooks, feel free to look at the Maryland Code. I don't know why you would read that. I'm an attorney, and even I don't want to read that because it's not very exciting. And then finally, this is us. We're Grad Legal Aid. For some reason, our email is not popping up on there, but it is glao@umd.edu. You can email us anytime to schedule an appointment or ask us a quick question. And you can also go to gradlegalaid.umd.edu. That's our website. We have tons of resources on there about many different legal topics. So you feel free to, if you don't think your question warrants an appointment, feel free to look at some of our resources, but also don't hesitate to ask. I can answer any question, try to answer any question you have about laws in the state of Maryland regarding driving or other topics as well. But this was, as I said, this was our first in-person GRadulting workshop of the year, and we're transitioning to being back in person. So check out our website. You can see the schedule for all of our GRadulting workshops throughout this year. We're offering 10 this semester, 10 in the spring. We're doing some in person, some online in Zoom to sort of feel out our demand for what you, the graduate students, are hoping to participate in. For the ones that are in person, we do provide free lunch. So come on out, see us in person. If you're not here today in person and you're watching this online on our YouTube channel, then come on out in person next time and you can get a free lunch out of it. But always Tuesdays, 12:30, check on our website or during our newsletter, and you can stay up to date with the latest workshops that we're having. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you so much. I have one question. I am a graduate student. I have a Turkish driving license. How can I get Maryland license?
Yeah, and so to get a Maryland license, if you have a license from your home country in Turkey, then you have to take the knowledge test and the driving test. But you can go to, the first thing you want to do is go to their website, and it's this one here, the egov.maryland.gov/MBA/save. But if you go to just mba.maryland.gov, you might be able to find it as well. And you want to pre-submit your the documents for your international status so they can pre-verify them. And it's going to be to submit a copy of your passport. There's a whole big long list of things that qualify when you go through. It's actually kind of a pretty easy to use portal, which is surprising for things with the MBA. And so that's the first step. And then you can sort of immediately take the knowledge test, but I would recommend studying the handbook, which I am there. And so at that link, and really if you go to the MBA website along the left, there should be a getting a license. You can click that. And so the first thing to do is to study the Maryland Driver's Manual and prepare for the knowledge test. And so the knowledge test is pretty straightforward. You can usually complete it in about 20 minutes, but that's the first step. You can practice online as well. And then once you do that, you can then take the driving test, which the handbook online will tell you sort of what to expect. And it's just sort of basic driving safely. And when you pass that, then you can get your Maryland license. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, and so if your driver's license from your home country, you're eligible to drive in the state of Maryland using that for 12 months. If you plan on staying longer than that, we would recommend you get a Maryland driver's license sooner rather than later. But it lets you skip the driver's education course, which is 30 hours of classroom time plus 6 hours of driving with a certified instructor, and it also costs money that you have to pay. And so, but you do still have to take a written test and a driving test and pass a vision screening. But it gets you out of that longer course is what you can skip. But in the interim, while you're waiting to prepare for the knowledge test or that sort of thing, you can still drive on your home country license. If the home country license is not in English, you do have to get a certified translation of it. And you can do that through the MBA website. There is a list of the companies that they approve to do the translation, and you get a little certification and you just carry it around with you. Yep. Yep. And so that the last phone number, and I don't know if this slide has, built-in animations that for some reason aren't playing. But yes, this is our phone number. We are technically a part-time office, so we're only open Monday through Thursdays, and it's like 6 hours a day instead of 8. And so we usually recommend emailing at glao@mundy.edu because we can be more responsive that way, but feel free to call us as well.
And can you give me your email address?
Yep. So it's glao@umd.edu.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Please feel free to take any of the extra sandwiches we have in the back with you as you go. And don't forget to register for our upcoming workshops in the future. Next week is financial planning, while also being possibly a broke graduate student like I was when I was in graduate school. I was broke, but it's tips on if you want to start planning for your future or just budgeting in general. We're going to have a great speaker next week, so come out for that as well. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for watching online if you're still watching.